right. Happy Friday, everyone. Okay, welcome to week 19 of our APL Readers Corner. We've done 19 weeks of this. Woo, I don't know if anyone else has said that. Welcome. My name is Nicole. I have my special guest here, Stacy.
Hello.
We will be doing a book review on the book FantasticLand by Mike Bockoven. If you haven't tuned in before, the way our APL Readers Corner works is we choose books kind of based on their availability and preference on staff, and it's all through Hoopla. We review a book from a different genre each week, and you are more than welcome to read the book along with us or watch this video later and join in and ask questions, post comments. We'll make sure to answer them in the comments as well. The theme this week, we picked horror. So me and Stacy are really excited to talk about that. So I will let Stacy take it away.
All right, so horror. The definition of horror is a genre of fiction whose purpose is to create a feeling of fear, dread, repulsion, and terror. So in other words, it develops an atmosphere of horror. It emphasizes the reaction caused by horror, stemming from the French horror, meaning to shudder or to bristle. So there's a lot of different types of horror. There's the classic Gothic horror. It's a dark style of fiction that combines horror and romanticism. It's usually seductive and kind of pleasing. It's written with and without supernatural elements, but I think it tends to be more supernatural. It definitely is more mysterious. So some examples of this are Dracula, Frankenstein, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Another type of genre is supernatural horror. So that relies heavily on the supernatural, like ghosts, demons, monsters, aliens, witchcraft, all the spooky stuff that, you know, everyone questions if they really exist. So supernatural horror, a lot of it is just based on the human reaction to being faced with, like, dealing with the unknown. So a lot of this can be like a haunting, a possession, a curse, or an omen. And then the third biggest horror genre, which is what FantasticLand falls under, is non-supernatural horror. So that's horror without the ghosts. Usually it's really plausible to real life. When you read it, when you experience it, it feels like something that could happen, like actually. So FantasticLand fits into this one. It doesn't have any ghosts. It doesn't have any supernatural. It's not romantic. A few of the common themes: you explore wicked characters, deeds, or phenomena. They arouse feelings of fear, shock, or disgust, as well as a sense of the uncanny. Things are not what they seem. Let me take a look at my notes. A lot of times horror is intense. They create intense emotions, intense tones, intense moods, environments, and all together they tie in to just create something that's really ominous. A lot of times horrors will have plot twists to keep you on your toes. So yeah, a lot of horror tends to deal with like morbid situations, repetitive cycles of violence to death-related uncanny scenarios. Examples are like zombies marching, vampires make you join their legion, you know, long dead friends or relations pay unexpected visits. So another interesting thing about horror, and it's not something I see a lot with books, but I see it a lot with horror movies, is the style of mockumentaries. And this book kind of does like as close as you can get to a mockumentary while being a book. So every chapter is an interview with a different character. And I think that just really, I'm not sure how to phrase it. that structure for this novel with the non-supernatural, like realistic horror, it just really ties in well together. But yeah, you want to talk a little bit about the actual book?
Yes. Yes, so I can definitely attest that Fantasticland hits a lot of those genre themes that you were talking about, especially the non-supernatural, where something like this, I believe, could actually happen. So the summary for this book is, since the 1970s, Fantasticland has been the theme park where fun is guaranteed, with an exclamation point. But when a hurricane ravages the Florida coast and isolates the park, the employees find it anything but fun. 5 weeks later, the authorities who rescue the survivors encounter a scene of horror. Photos emerge online of heads on spikes outside of rides, human bones littering the gift shop, breaking records for hits, views, likes, clicks, and shares. So the question is, how could a group of survivors, mostly teenagers, commit such terrible acts? It's presented as a fact-finding investigation with a series of first-person murders. It pieces together the grisly series of events. Park policy was that the mostly college-age employees surrender their electronic devices to preserve the authenticity of the Fantasticland experience. Cut off from the world, left on their own, teenagers soon form rival tribes who viciously compete for food, medicine, social dominance, and even human flesh. This new social network divides the ravaged dreamland into territories ruled by the pirates, shop girls, freaks, and the mole people. If meticulously curated online personas can replace private identities, what takes over when those constructs are lost? I love it that it's kind of a modern take on Lord of the Flies meets Battle Royale. So think that, and that's exactly how this story takes place. The author is Mike Bockoven. I found this from his little author bio website. He writes nasty little thriller horror novels while his kids are in gymnastics and piano lessons. He lives in Grand Island, Nebraska, smack in the middle of the state. His first book, which was Fantasticland, came out in October of 2016 through Skyhorse Publishing. His second book, called Pack, came out in July of 2018. He has a wife and 2 kids.
I did not know that he wrote nasty little thriller and horror as well as kids were in gymnastics.
That's what he liked to say.
That just makes me laugh. I also didn't know this was his first book. That's really cool. So the social media reviews for this book it's so interesting. So they're really high. Amazon is a 4.5 out of 5, Goodreads is a 4 out of 5, and Hoopla is a 4.5 out of 5. And yet, when you look at the reviews, it's very divided. People either absolutely loved it or they absolutely hated it.
Yeah, true.
I think, and judging by the social media like stars, I think most people tend to like it. So I think the first thing we should always start with in a book talk is, how did you feel about the book? Like it, not like it?
I liked it a lot. Probably what first attracted me to this book was that it was going to be a modern take on Lord of the Flies. I absolutely love Lord of the Flies. And I was like, ooh, modern. Okay, how are they going to twist this to be more modern? And they definitely did. The way he wrote it made it seem like this was a real event. If you Google it, other people have Googled it. It's not real, but it feels real. And that's kind of the theme of horror, is that it's so plausible that you honestly believe that this could actually happen. So I think I like that aspect. I love that aspect of it. There's no supernatural occurrences. It's something that when kids are cut off from civilization, they are savage beasts. And I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
I will agree. I was a literature major, so Lord of the Flies it's up there. So it was really interesting to see it modern day, what it would be like now. More, it's still isolated because they're trapped inside the theme park, but not like on a forbidden island. They're just, in Florida.
Yeah.
But yes, I lost my train of thought like halfway through that sentence. I'm so sorry.
No, it was perfectly described. Yeah, they took Lord of the Flies, put it smack dab in Florida, where they're still cut off from civilization, not knowing if they're going to be rescued. They were supposed to be rescued within 72 hours. It wasn't until 5 weeks later they were rescued.
It's crazy. So what did you think of the first person interview narrative? I sort of talked about it with the mockumentary style.
Right. I think that's what made it more horrific and plausible, because the way he did it was he was actually writing as an author of the book about this horrific event. And so he created a book, and each chapter was an interview from a different person who experienced this event differently. So it started with kind of the higher up management on how they dealt with when the storm was first presented. And then it went to the surviving employees who actually were in the midst of this horrific, violent theme park. And then it went to the National Guard, one of the former guys who was in the rescue mission. Mm-hmm. And so he pieced each interview together so that it kind of followed the story seamlessly, but from a different point of view. And like I said, it kind of made it even more kind of like more horrific, just because you're going, okay, this person sounded like he had to kill because it was self-defense, but who started this? And then you hear from each character, and it got to a point where it was kill or be killed. That was the mentality of these kids. So I enjoyed that part.
That kind of makes me think, how did you, like, why do you think that this happened? Like, why do you think that the kids were so quick to go violent? And, they had access to food, they had access to water, they had access to shelter. Did you think it was plausible that they responded so quickly to violence?
I think so. I think what it started was that there was the arising panic. I think everything was fine and dandy when they were down in the storm shelter. What really started the uphill towards violence was when the power first went out. Mm-hmm. There was a huge form of panic, and while the power was out, several people actually got trampled, and there was one kid who died because he couldn't have access to his inhaler. And they were very upset at their manager, who was supposed to be kind of, stopping this chaos, and he kind of didn't. And there were rumors going around that he actually killed someone while the power was out. So I feel like from that point forward, they felt there was no leadership. There was just that ongoing sense of panic, and that while they knew there was food and everything, they weren't sure how it was going to last. And that there were some people that were just like, well, I'm going to survive, and I'm going to look out for number one. And the only way to do that is probably through violence. And so there are a lot of kids that felt like that's what they had to do. And if you look at like a lot of modern pop culture, like I'm thinking of Lost, and I'm thinking of all these other TV series where the minute you cut each other self off from civilization, for some reason human nature takes over. And of course it's kill or be killed. It's top of the food chain. I mean, look at Lost. They have this huge island, huge, but they still try to hurt each other over little areas. It's the same as in FantasticLand. It was a huge park. It was 5 separate areas into one big park. They all could have just dispersed and not hurt each other. But no, that's not how human nature, I think, works.
Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting, especially when you consider it as I don't want to say necessarily a modern retelling of Lord of the Flies, because I don't necessarily know if that's what the author was going for.
Probably not, no.
But, to see it, I mean, when was Lord of the Flies written? Like, I'm going to Google it real fast.
Yeah. No, I mean, especially because there's certain aspects of Lord of the Flies where it's a lot different, where they had like, there was a lot less people. This was about 300 employees versus I think it was a group of boys.
Mm-hmm.
So it was on a larger scale, and there was one point where they tried to do some kind of peace. They had a council, they called the Council of Peace, which ended up being the Council of Pieces because more violence ensued. So it reminds me similar to the conch, where
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't talk until you had the conch. So there were some elements of Lord of the Flies, but I don't think that's exactly what he was going for.
Right. No, I can see that. I think it's interesting that Lord of the Flies was written in 1954, and this idea and fear of how humans react when they're in this unknown situation without leadership and guidance. I mean, it was prevalent in 1954, and clearly it's still prevalent in 2016 and 2020.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see those kind of themes and topics just repeat and like change with people as we enter new eras and
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
So we found out that many of the rumors going around the circus area where the majority of the killers weren't true because they used fake props to scare away the other tribes. Do you think them causing fear in the other tribes inspired more violence?
Yeah. So spoiler, there was one of the chapters where so many people have been talking about the World Circus area and that they were the ones that killed most of the people. And then you had an employee from the circus area describe what they did. And what it turned out was they used props from their Halloween festivals to create this entrance to stop anyone else from coming in. And it worked. Everyone assumed they were putting heads on stakes, hanging people from wires, and they even did something where they used certain music when people would come in, shadow effects, sound effects, and it just scared anyone that tried to come near them. So the pirates especially, pirates was another big group that was kind of the most violent as well. They even stayed away. And so one of the questions that actually the author investigator asked was, do you think you caused more violence? And he goes, yeah, and I'm like, no, I think you did. But at the same time, you were genius because his group was the one who came out with most of the employees that survived. So while he did definitely cause fear in the other tribes, I think what happened was the way they perceived those actions inspired some of them to create the exact same violence. Some of the other tribes ended up hanging bodies from wires, putting heads on spikes. So a little bit of both, but at the same time, they did that to survive. So kudos to them for thinking of that. I'm sorry, but kudos.
It reminds me in a very like not very tied together, but it kind of reminds me of Home Alone.
Yes.
The kid just creates all these like big shadows and things to make the house look very populated, even though it's not. And then, I feel like it's not spoiler. They don't want to go in.
They don't, but it also makes them want to get in that much more. They
exactly.
keep trying.
And then they go, oh, something's up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yes.
So what do you think about the actions and responses taken by the leader of the pirates, Brock Hockney? Although he states that no one tried to stop him in the beginning when violence ensued, is he really the scapegoat in all of this?
Brock is an interesting character. When they first talk about him, everyone literally points to him and says he's the one that started it all because he started with a mercy killing. A kid fell off a roof. He was badly, badly hurt where even their first aid people could not help him. So he did a mercy killing. He used a stanchion, beat his head. Everyone saw that from then on, the fear actually grew. And a lot of them said that, if it weren't for that, they probably wouldn't have started. So they asked Brock that exact same question. Do you think you started this violence? And he's like, the way they described him was, you think he was this big macho man And he was, but at the same time, he had the personality and character of Hannibal Lecter. So the inner workings of his mind was definitely different than any of us. He had no remorse. He had no guilt. When they would ask him about certain things, he was just like, yeah, but no one stopped me. No one else took my place. They're like, you were the one who became the leader. He goes, I didn't ask to be. I didn't make myself the leader. No one else stopped me. So his way of kind of taking him out of all this, kind of saying like, okay, yes, I did the mercy killing, but no one else did. No one stopped me. So he was kind of appealing to human nature, going that there's always going to be that one person that people are going to look to, whether they want to be looked to or not. He just assumed the role because no one else stopped him. So at the same time, is he the scapegoat? Yes, but he also did it. But he also had a great way of explaining it, going, well, yes, but the way his mind was working, he was way more mature than some of those other kids. And so you could tell if he wouldn't have gotten incarcerated, he probably wouldn't have been a serial killer. I'm sorry, but he was a sociopath. But also at the same time, his actions were somewhat justified because it was his brother that ended up being the first one to die when the power went out. His brother was the one with the inhaler. And so he said, yeah, some of my actions were for my brother only because leadership failed us when they should have been helping us. But he's guilty. So.
And say, it just creates so much issue when you start thinking about mercy killing.
Well, there's always one. I mean, we even saw in Lord of the Flies, there was always that one kid who looked to violence as the first way out, where other people were looking at peace. He was like, no, this is the only way it's going to work. Logically, he might have been right. He might have also been wrong too. But there are some people who logically think, they go with their human nature, and they go with top of the food chain. They go with kill or be killed as their motto.
Do you think, I don't know, do you remember Lord of the Flies very well? It's been a really long time since I read it. Do you think so we always have like, in Lord of the Flies, there's like the main kid, and then there's the kid who provokes violence, the other side of the island. Do you think Brock Hockney is that same antagonist from Lord of the Flies?
Yes,
okay.
No doubt.
Exactly. I would agree.
But at the same time, he also, like I said, he definitely is, but at the same time, he had some good points where he's like, well, no one else stepped up. Everyone just assumed I was the leader, so I took it. He was like, I'm not a big guy. 2 guys could have easily stopped me. So he was kind of like one of those where it's like, yes, I started stuff, but I also, also claimed, culpability, like no culpability, that kind of thing. That kind of, you know what I mean? So yes, I definitely think he was the kid in Lord of the Flies, but modern day.
I say modern day, and honestly just kind of more well-rounded. Maybe not well-rounded, but again, his actions are somewhat justified, and we see it through his point of view, which you don't get to see in Lord of the Flies. So.
No, maybe that's why this is a lot different than that, because it's written from a fact-finding investigation, where Lord of the Flies was just a third-person narrative.
Right.
And that can definitely change the scope of the entire story. So we don't see the inner workings of that kid's mind, but we see the inner workings of Brock's mind.
Right. That's why I really like books that are interviewee, mockumentary style.
Definitely.
I don't read a whole lot, but or a whole lot of those. But it's always nice to be able to have that insight into how other people are thinking. Do you think it would have gone differently if he hadn't have started the Pirates Tribe?
Well, I guess if you look at it from his point of view, If he would have started it, I think someone else would have been fearful enough to have started something. So if it wouldn't have been him, it might have been someone else. But I'd like to think that if it weren't for him, also the way he started the Pirates tribe, they had a certain code to live by, and the code was very violent. It was very respectable among their tribe where they were brothers, they stuck together, but then it was them versus everyone else. So I wonder if I think tribes would have still started just because it's human nature to group together. But I would like to think that violence wouldn't have ensued as much. I think they would have just dealt with the typical, because it was still raining and windy from all that time. I think there would still have been sickness. I think there still would have been death, but I just don't think it would have been as gruesome. But at the same time, if it wouldn't have been so gruesome, they wouldn't have been found. The only reason they kept leaving that park alone, because according to management, they kept saying they're fine, they have access to all this stuff, they're low on the totem pole. And it wasn't until they did a flyover and looked at the satellite cameras, they saw bodies. That's what got everyone's attention. I would like to think that eventually they would have been saved, but how much longer would they have been there if it weren't for all that, all the violence and the bodies that people saw? So
that's really interesting. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I didn't think about it till just now.
They're like, yeah, I know the violence is not good, obviously, but if they hadn't have done it, they wouldn't have been rescued.
They would have still been put.
Who knows when?
They still would have been put further down on the totem pole in priorities, because their management, it wasn't the CEO. The CEO tried to get the board to get them rescued sooner. It was someone in his management staff that convinced the National Guard they were fine. Isn't that crazy? One person.
I wonder, my brain can't quite wrap around it right now, but I wonder what that is saying.
Yes.
That the reason they were found and the reason they even got to them is because of the violence. Like, I don't know. I feel like it's saying something. My brain just can't put it together.
Oh, I think so too. But also, that's also my brain going, what if it did? Like, violence is what got them. It's like, maybe not. Maybe someone else would say, no, they probably would have been rescued. But I don't think they would have been rescued as soon. I mean, 5 weeks is long enough. But what if it was longer?
How crazy. Eventually they'll run out of food. They're going to keep getting sick. I mean, you're right. It's interesting.
Right?
So what is this book trying to get at when it comes to human nature when cut off from society?
Just that, I hate to say it, but your inner savage does take over when there is no, leadership. There's no, higher entity telling you right from wrong. You are just gonna take what you think is right and wrong, and then take what everyone else thinks is right and wrong, and kind of go from there. I can also say, though, at the same time, it's also human nature to go in packs, as we have seen, because they did separate into tribes. There was still that human nature where you do admit that you need someone else in order to survive. You can't survive on yourself alone. So there was definitely that camaraderie. There was that survival in groups kind of thing. But at the same time, it sounds like our inner savage won out when it came to being cut off from society and technology. Unfortunately, when I told my boyfriend the book I was reading, he was like, let me guess, the kids are cut off from Facebook and they're going to kill each other. I'm like, actually, yeah, how'd you know? But that's, unfortunately, when technology and society is gone, inner savage, inner survival instincts kick in.
Yeah. So that was a lot of the criticism on the lower review, like the lower rated reviews, was why would kids start killing each other because they don't have Instagram and Facebook?
It's not about the Instagram and the Facebook. It has nothing to do. I mean, of course, they're so used to being the center of attention and having followers and everything, but I think it just stemmed more from that. It was beyond that. It was no longer having someone telling you right and wrong, no longer having someone telling you what to do. It's up to you. And for some people, they stepped up. For others, they followed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like I said, unfortunately, your inner savage, your inner survival Darwinism takes over.
It's less about the particular apps that they're missing and more about the existential loneliness that they're now facing and isolation, being absolutely cut off from everything but this park and the murdering people.
And I think some other reviews might have said that because they were not only cut off from society, but then they were in an amusement park that made you completely disconnect from reality. The way they made these parks was so that the real world didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So you add on top of that, they're numb to reality. Their senses are numbed. And all that takes over is fear and panic.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was probably another thing as well.
Interesting take. I like it.
It was a great book for those of you who want to, read up on a modern take on Lord of the Flies. If you enjoyed Lord of the Flies as much as we did, I think you guys would really enjoy this book, and also learn the inner workings of each employee as they were in the midst of this violent event.
If you're like me and you like characters, this is
I
a
like to
story
know how their
driven by
brain
characters.
like to know what's going on in here when they're doing things. So yeah, you and I are the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's all for today, right, Stacy?
Well, I think so.
Cool. That was a great discussion. I think we rocked it. Um, thank you everyone for tuning in. Please tune in to our next story time, our virtual story time, Monday, August 3rd at 10 a.m. The awesome Mr. Brandon is going to be doing it. Also next week, Friday, August 7th, will be our APL mystery reads at 1 p.m. We are moving over to Fridays starting in August. We will be doing a lot of our adult virtual programs on Fridays at 1 p.m. to make it easy for everyone's schedule. Also, the week after, August 14th at 1 p.m., Jordan and Tessie will be doing the APL Readers Corner. The genre is poetry. They will be reviewing Lady Churchill's Rosebud Wristlet number 33 by Michael J. DeLuca. Also, one more thing. Starting in September, we have some new and exciting adult virtual programming for you. Me and Stacy are so excited. Tune in September to find out what those are. But thanks again for joining us. Thank you, Stacy. My name's Nicole. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye.